Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be covering the recent balance patch that was implemented a couple days ago. It was on a Tuesday. I already forgot the date. But I'm fairly excited to discuss this because I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to try to keep this short because I know a lot of people have already been discussing this and I'm kind of late to the game. So I'm going to give it an abridged, shortened version, speed round, and then talk about some other things that have been swimming around in my noggin that I have, which is quite a interesting experience, if I do say so myself. Okay, jumping right into it. We have the Elementalist. Overall, there were buffs to their sword attack speed for the auto attacks, and I have to say it does feel much more satisfying to use. I don't really remember the auto attack feeling weird until they reduced some of the aftercasts. And after they did that, I'm like, wow, this actually feels 100% more satisfying to use, along with some aftercast reductions. There was some increased damage for some fire skills and fire-air combinations. I was kind of disappointed. I wanted some increases in damage for the other attunements because as an Elementalist, whenever I play Elementalist, I don't typically just sit in one attunement, or I try not to. I try to get the flavor of everything. So I think, especially for Earth, Water, some of their damage numbers could have been buffed a little bit, and maybe even for Air, especially with some of the combinations. And perhaps maybe for some of the... Also, I just noticed that they never touched the other weapon skill combinations, which I thought was interesting. So maybe that is in the future, but just something to think about. They also increased or made some alterations to some of the Conjure weapons with Conjure Fiery Greatsword and Conjure Earthshield. With Conjure Earthshield, it is now focused on Barrier, which I think is really interesting, and overall I think is a step in the right direction, especially for people who want to be tanky. Moving on to Engineer. I'm not an Engineer player, and I don't have too much knowledge on Engineer, but from what I can read, they seem to be buffs. Sword damage was increased and some of the projectiles were increased, and hollow mode, I believe that's what it's called, all their abilities were increased or got some sort of buff with combo finishers, projectile combos, and overall it seems pretty nice. Photon Wall got a reduced aftercast by 0.25 seconds. I apologize that I can't really speak too much on Engineer, but I'd rather not speak on it than speak on it and upset some Engineer players. Moving on to Guardian. I was kind of, I don't want to say disappointed. I really appreciate the changes that were implemented, but I feel like there could have been other areas that they could have looked at. But for this balance patch, they increased the range and radius of all mantras. So it used to be 300 range, they increased it to 450. It used to be a 120 radius, they increased it to 180. I was always in favor of increasing the radius to 180, but I was not so sure that they would ever increase the range, but thankfully they did, and it feels so much more potent because having that small little cone was really difficult to use and shoddy at times. But with the 450 increase, I feel like Guardian players will be much more accepting of the mantras, especially in support builds. I know some of the mantras are more offensive and utility based, but the mantras in my eyes are a bit more supportive. So possibly for like raids or something, for quickness or regen or stability. You never know. But moving on to the traits that were changed, they altered Healer's Retribution, but the two traits that I want to focus on is Liberator's Vow and Stalwart Speed. They reduced the internal cooldown of Liberator's Vow from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, and they increased Stalwart Speed's internal cooldown from 5 seconds to 8 seconds. Honestly, I've wanted to say this for such a long time, but I think Liberator's Vow and Stalwart Speed should just be put into one trait. It's like, Liberator's Vow is a adept, and it seems kind of, I don't know, low effort in conjunction with Stalwart Speed, because they're basically two traits that do the same thing. It's just one is when you just use a heal skill, one's when you just grant stability or Aegis. I can definitely understand people saying that they want that flexibility, but I think it'd just be easier if it was smashed into one trait, and it would leave Liberator's Vow to be, or leave it open to be a more fun and exciting trait. I also want to talk about a Guardian a little bit more because when I first got to this section, I said I was a little disappointed, but I'm a firm believer that the staff auto attack is just not good, like at all. Wave of Wrath, I know like it was like the theme that the auto attack was an AoE, but it's only a 300 range, and I know the increased angle at which it hits people is nice. It's just, it doesn't make sense for me because all the other abilities on staff are range. They have they have a 1200 range, they have a 900 range. Even the fourth skill, Empowerment, has a fairly large radius at which it heals people and grants might to allies. But with the auto attack, you have to be at 300 range. I really think that they should just change the staff into an auto attack and give that sense of range to the Guardian, especially with Dragon Hunter. If you don't take Dragon Hunter, you don't necessarily have a long range weapon other than Scepter. I think if they gave Guardian a 1200 range auto attack, much more satisfying, much more easy, especially in PvP settings, because you can be a little bit more backline support. That's what I want to say about Guardian. It's been on my mind. I didn't know when to talk about it, so I thought it'd be appropriate in this section. Moving on to Mesmer. I apologize if that was a little long. One thing that was really, really just like a quality of life is that they implemented a UI texture, a UI effect when you are in Mirage Cloak. So it's a little bit more visible. But other than that, they altered the camera angles, which is something I forgot to mention in my previous videos about balance. But I think this is so good. There's been way too many times in before this patch that I would use something like I think it's like Axis of Symmetry and then Illusionary Ambush, where I was just completely turned the opposite direction. I wasn't even facing the enemy and I had to turn around and run, and by the time I turned around and got to the target, my ambush skill was completely gone. It was just back to the auto attack. So I'm so glad that they are making changes to the camera and where you are positioned when you use shadow stepping abilities. Also, I wanted to mention Chaos Vortex. The increase, this is the staff ambush, has a projectile speed increase by 25% and flat damage increase by 20%. And they removed confusion and torment conditions and replaced it with bleeding and burning and vulnerability. At first I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But on second thought, after I took a step back, I was like, you know what? It kind of makes sense. It thematically ties into the auto attack of Winds of Chaos that applies bleeding, burning, and vulnerability. And I think the confusion and torment should be left to Scepter. So I think keeping that weapon identity separate, I think it's a smart move. I don't think it's as strong though. So just pushing that out there. But I think it is kind of better because it's, I don't know. I'm gonna leave it at that. I feel like it's better for the game overall. Moving on to the possibly the most shocking class that was changed, Necromancer. I know there have been many people, it's on Reddit, forums, YouTube, people have been talking about Necromancer and Reaper like it's the Holy Grail, and I kind of agree. They got some massive changes to Reaper, which I was kind of surprised. I was fairly certain that they would change something with Scourge, but they opted out for Scourge in favor of Reaper, and I'm kind of excited, kind of lit that they did that. Overall, there was like 30%, 25%, 40% damage increases to skills all across the board in Reaper Shroud. But to compensate, Reaper Shroud does degenerate faster, so keep in mind of the limited use of Reaper Shroud. Also, they increased the auto attack a little bit. Fading Twilight is 8% stronger, and Chilling Scythe is 21% stronger, so it's much more hard-hitting of a weapon for the auto attack. Also, they changed some of the traits that were working with Shroud, fixing some bugs. Unholy Martyr got changed to be a little more supportive, kind of, but less deadly to the person using Unholy Martyr. And Plague Signet got changed. So, and Plague Signet, you kind of now have a bit more control over the skill. So instead of just it proccing on a crit or whatever it used to be, it's now whenever you use your first attack in a Shroud, it sends your conditions to the enemy. That's Necromancer. Trying not to talk about this too much. But for Ranger, oh my gosh, finally, oh my god, singing to the heavens, singing to church, galloping, frolicking along the beach. They changed spirits for the better. They increased the amount of allies that they affect from 5 allies up to 10. So in raids, it's going to be much more flexible. You don't always need 2 rangers to provide spirits. You can now just have 1 ranger. And in fact, I did a raid a little while ago. I think it was like 2 days ago. And it provided so much more flexibility because 1 ranger took Frost Spirit while I took Sun Spirit. So I was like, you know what? And it saves up an extra utility slot so I could take another glyph because I was running Druid, or take Search and Rescue. So it was overall a great change, especially if you have multiple Druids or Rangers in a group. You now have pretty much a free utility slot to customize. Also, there were changes to... Also, I almost completely skipped over this. There was a huge change to Grace of the Land. It now just is a normal might stacker, kind of like Phallic Strength, and Phallic Strength got a change as well. They're really looking at raid stuff with like might stacking and spirits and how many targets certain skills affect, which I'm really glad to provide a little bit more flexibility overall. Also, some of the some of the stances were changed. Griffin stance, Vulture stance, Moa stance, and One Wolf Pack were all changed for the better. And some of the pets were changed as well. Moving on to the Revenant, which you probably have been watching in the background. Revenant might be my new love. Power Revenant. It is so much fun because of the offhand sword changes, and it seems so like small and minuscule, but these changes really just brought Power Revenant in open world PvE to a new level, in my opinion. So basically what they did is they made it more offensive. They made Shackling Wave just a base skill. You no longer have Duelist Perception, so you don't have that defensive capability. You just use Shackling Wave. I think it was the base damage was reduced by 20%, but the bonus strikes are equal to 25% of the initial impact. It has multiple strikes now, and it immobilizes and I'm pretty sure causes vulnerability. Could be wrong on that part. But they also just gave them a new skill, just like straight up. They have Death Strike on their 5th skill. There's no longer, I forgot the name of it. It's like grappling. It's like that one skill that you hit them and then you teleported them backwards. It was kind of weird. But fairly useful for singling out targets. But they replaced it with Death Strike, which is really hard hitting. You teleport to the target, do some damage, and then you will strike them a second time if you successfully teleported them for a much stronger hit. Also, some conditions with Revenant Shortbow were increased. Bloodbane Path, duration of bleeding, was increased from 7 seconds to 8 seconds. 7-shot, the Torment duration was increased from 4 seconds to 7 seconds. And Spirit Crush, the duration of burning, was increased from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. And they increased the duration of slow from 1 second to 1.5 seconds. Overall, I think it's better. You know, pretty good. Also, the traits. The traits are so much more fun for Invocation. They altered the Grandmaster traits, 2 of the Grandmaster traits, and a couple of the Master and maybe Adept trait. But they made them much more in line with swapping legends, and they got rid of that that energy threshold requirement thing where like if you're above 50% you heal people, if you're below 50% you damage people. It was kind of weird to use. And I've noticed that most of the time revenants aren't above 50% because they're just constantly using skills and all that stuff, which is kind of why I'm in favor of having the default energy level be at 75%, because I am very rarely above 50% because I'm just constantly using abilities. But you know, that's for another video. For Thief, they also looked at some of the might generation for Fire for Effect. This grants might. I haven't been playing too much Thief, so I'm kind of out of loop, but Thief now has a solid source of might stacking, along with Grace Land and Phallic Strength both being looked at. It allows, you know, Ranger, Thief, and Warrior to be sufficient might stackers now, so much more flexibility, especially in a raid group, possibly in PvP and World vs. World. But along with the might changes, there's also changes to shadow stepping and bug fixing and distance detection, all that stuff. And that's all I really have to say about Thief. Moving on to Warrior. This was kind of unexpected. I wasn't expecting them to change Axe, but after they brought it up, I'm like, yeah, Axe needed a damage increase because Axe is a little weird. But overall, they increased the amount of damage Axe does. They changed Balance Stance and Berserker Stance a little bit. And more importantly, they changed Phallic Strength. The duration is no longer 6 seconds, but it is 4 seconds. So that brings it a little bit more in line with Grace of the Land and the Thief might stacking ability. And overall, I think that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover. There was some people saying like, oh, why'd you have to nerf Phallic Strength? I think it was a appropriate nerf, just by a little bit. I think might stacking is really useful in raids, but it's a necessity also. And so I think bringing them a little bit more in line with the Grace of the Land and Thief, I think it's Fire for Effect. Yeah. So Fire for Effect and Grace of the Land, I think they needed to bring it down just a little bit to make sure that they have somewhat of a place. So that's just my opinion. So I think that was all I had to say about this so far. Yeah. I could just really talk about mounts really quickly because it is a hot topic. And I could make a totally separate video and just get a bunch load of views because that's just an easy way of doing it. But I don't know. I really have just tried to stay out of this whole mount conundrum because it's taxing. It's really taxing on me, and I just can't take this toxicity and toxic energy. I don't know. It's been rough, but I definitely think that ArenaNet will never do this again. And I hope you guys understand that too. If you guys are a little bit upset about this, I can almost guarantee you they will never do this again. Because if they do, severe repercussions. And that's what happens when you make mistakes. You learn from them, or you hopefully learn from them. And I think ArenaNet has. They've made a thread where you can go post feedback. Don't be mean. Just be like, hey, don't. Another thing, I've noticed that a lot of people are acting very immature. They're like, I'm not gonna buy more. I'm like, okay, if you only play the game for the gem store, maybe, I mean, you know, to each their own, but you know, it's kind of sad. I definitely understand arguments where they're like, oh, they should have made this a raid. Some of these mount skins raid rewards. I am 100% in agreement with that. I honestly think that the reforged Jackal skin should have been a reward that you can get if you defeat like the final boss of the next raid wing. Give people more incentive to do raids and to try out the new raid. So I think that was kind of a missed opportunity. And it's just more satisfying to get rewards in game for like a difficult challenge that you complete. And I don't think just whipping out your credit card is satisfying. It's definitely not satisfying because you're forking out money, but they have to make money somehow. I also think that just the amount of skins that they gave and their options really hurt them. I think if they spaced it out a little bit more, they would have made the same amount of money, because it's like outfits. What are there, like 50 outfits now? People have probably bought almost all of them because, you know, it came out slowly and they were each 700 each. It's like, oh, in 2 weeks you get another outfit, and people are like, oh, they don't really see the accumulation of money. When you give people just a huge quantity at once, it can be a bit daunting. But that's all I really had to say about that. I don't want to touch too much on it because I really don't care. Just straight up, I don't care. Because the more I care about something, especially this controversial, the more I just end up hating and getting in a bad mood. So I recommend people just not caring for a little bit. See how that fares on your psyche. But other than that, I really love the balance changes, and I hope we can get back on track to important things other than gem stores. I know the gem store is important, but more in-game content importance. So I hope everyone has an amazing day. I'm going to work on some more videos because I have a free day. It's Friday. It's Veterans Day, or actually Veterans Day is tomorrow, but I don't have classes today, so I'm probably going to live stream and stuff. Thank you everyone for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like the video if you liked it. Comment down below about your thoughts on the balance changes and what you hope the balance team will change in the future. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye everyone. Mwah.